In this episode of Finding You, we're going to explore the ways in which we can find healing in ourselves, given the chaos of our external world. Our external world has gotten crazier and crazier, and this is not just a subjective sense, but it is objectively more complicated and complex and volatile in the modern world, because never before, or rarely before, has there been such a sense of doom by the planet. And this is okay because it is natural for humanity and Earth and all her species to go through cycles. Nothing is meant to last forever, and things must eventually come to a close. And often that ending brings about something better, although in the moment it may not feel that way. Because even the things that we treasure and hold dear may often be what is wrong with us and our systems, but it's what we know, it's what we understand. In some cases, it's what we've created. Giving up the known for the unknown can feel unacceptably scary. However, that's just our mind speaking to us, and it's not necessarily the truth. Our minds can play tricks on ourselves. And when we subscribe too closely to the beliefs of our mind, we can get stuck because our minds are often not that flexible unless we have an intentional practice of being open and being willing to revise our assessment of what's happening around us for a better theory or a better practice or a better offering or a better way of doing things. So it's this tendency of our mind to form an opinion and not revisit it is what can make us feel stuck and can make us feel scared when things start to change. So it really comes down to a habit of reassessing what we know and forming a new opinion and adapting to what is or what is becoming. And while this may not feel natural to everybody in every scenario, what is also true is that the more we practice that, the more easily we can do it. So in other words, adopting a habit of adapting is what can help us move through change more easily, efficiently, and actually to notice and to embrace the opportunities within. We tend to like to say that we want things to improve, but when they actually do, we often resist it or we get scared. And so there's nothing wrong with that except for when we are no longer dealing in reality and we're no longer seeking that improvement and allowing things to fall apart. And it's not just our outer world that might fall apart, but our inner world. There's a reason the world is in so much stress and anxiety and depression is because our minds are not keeping up with the times. It's not something you can blame on somebody else because in the end, it's your own choice, whether you stick to what you think you know or you allow yourself to take in new information and change your mind and do so in a deliberate way. For example, it's easy to hear somebody complain and cry about something and to automatically take their side or their position without assessing it for yourself. And by assessing, it means that you look at multiple point of views. Simply looking at one point of view and changing your mind isn't necessarily helpful. It's just exchanging your point of view for somebody else's who may not necessarily be more on track or on target than you are. But if you look at 5 people's perspectives or 5 different viewpoints and then choose the one that makes the most sense, especially after you collect some information about the situation, then you might be making a better decision. There's a tension in society where people like to either make decisions with data or with their feelings. This is a natural personality trait called either thinking or feeling, as defined by the Myers-Briggs. There's no one right way to do it. Both thinking and feeling are useful ways to assess information and guide decision-making. What can become problematic is just using one strategy or the other while excluding the other viewpoints. This is what we would call lacking balance. So for example, if there is a personnel problem in your department, logic might say that it's best to fire them or discipline them, but a thinking and feeling perspective might ask you to take into account their feelings and the feelings of the other people when making a disciplinary decision, not only in terms of the decision itself, but how it's done, because how things are done are just important as the decision itself. What might be perfectly logical and reasonable and in the best interest of the department and the organization and even the person themselves could turn into a disaster if it's done cruelly or unkindly or in a way that's unfair. So the best decisions are made by using both the left and the right brain, the logical side of the brain, which is the left brain, but also the emotional feeling side of the brain, which is the right brain, which also contains the intuition. The wisest course of action will be balanced. It will contain both logic and a sensitivity to people's feelings. Because in the end, this is a relational world. And if we are not minding our relationships as we go about our business, then we are likely to create conflict, alienation, and disharmony. That decision to take a balanced approach happens within each of us. It's easy to accuse somebody else of acting imbalanced, and it's often easy to see in others. But in the end, it boils down to our own choice, whether we are choosing to ascribe to a balanced approach, or if we want to take the shortcut and pick an either-or approach and push forward with it regardless of the consequences or other people's objections or concerns. This simple example in the workplace is only one of many ways to think about one's world. This is a personnel issue in the workplace, but you can apply this to your personal relationships, either at home or in your community. You could apply it to your relationship with money or food or material goods, anything else in your life. So for example, you can decide whether or not I'm going to have a second brownie for dessert. The thinking approach would say, well, I don't need the extra calories. Whereas the feeling approach would say, boy, I really want that. And if you take an either-or approach, you'll either walk away feeling dissatisfied and maybe eat more later, or you'll just overeat. Whereas a more balanced approach might be to say, well, I'm going to wait and see how I feel in 20 minutes. And if I'm still hungry, I'll find something else to eat. That way you can satisfy your body and how you feel about eating with what you actually do. This approach has its merits. The downside is that it takes time and effort to be more considerate and deliberative about what are often mindless decisions. But those mindless decisions can take us to places that do not necessarily serve us. It's also not reasonable to decide to be more deliberative on everything in our life all at once. You might just decide to take one part of your life, say eating, or relationships at work, or how I spend money, or whether I exercise, and just decide to be more deliberative in that one area, spending a few minutes every day on it. You could include doing a little research from reputable sources to add into the decision making. You could include talking to several people, and you could put it together and take both your feelings and your logic into account and decide what's right for you. It's hard to make a decision, though, sometimes when one of your inner voices are screaming at you. For example, your head might be screaming at you, do this, do that. If you don't, something bad will happen. This is called overthinking. And when we are overthinking, we're not allowing room in for our feelings. On the other hand, our feelings might be on overload. We might be in a panic, or stressed, or scared, or we might be in a stage of hunger and desire, or even lust. And when our feelings are on overwhelm, then we don't make room for our logic. So it's helpful to find balance between the two and find ways to either calm the mind or calm the emotions. You may have a set of tools that you like to use to calm your mind or calm your feelings. It could include listening to music, taking a bath, getting outside, exercising, doing something creative, getting a hug from a loved one, playing with your pet, and so forth. Again, this is something that you could decide to be deliberative and intentional on exploring. Do a little research from reputable sources, talk to a few people, and begin to experiment. Experimentation is very important because what might work for someone else may not work for you. And that's not a reason to give up. It's a reason to try something different or try it in a different way. We're all unique, and you need to find your own formula that works for you. So this concludes this episode of Finding You. Hope you have found it helpful for finding new ways to manage yourself and your life and create better balance and better choices in all areas of your life. Next week, we'll talk about finding your true self. Thank you for listening.